In a dramatic escalation of trade tensions, Ontario Premier Doug Ford has announced a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to the United States, marking a significant shift in the Canadian-American energy partnership. This move sends shockwaves through North American energy markets and signals a potential restructuring of trade relationships. Prime Minister Mark Carney's administration is taking an increasingly assertive stance against U.S. trade policies. During a speech on March 27, 2025, Carney declared that the era of old-fashioned closeness with the United States is over, backing this statement with concrete actions that could reshape North American energy dynamics. The numbers tell a compelling story. Canadian crude oil exports to the U.S. are projected to exceed $70 billion in 2024, representing approximately 11% of total U.S. oil imports. Canada supplies about 9 billion cubic meters of LNG annually to American markets, while electrical exports reached 65 terawatt-hours in 2024, accounting for 20% of consumption in some U.S. regions. "We hold these trump cards because we have a neighbor who imposes unilateral tariffs on us," Carney stated, emphasizing Canada's strategic leverage. The Canadian Parliament is exploring alternative markets for energy exports, suggesting a potential pivot away from U.S. dependency. This development represents more than just a trade dispute. It's a fundamental challenge to the North American energy ecosystem. With Canada controlling significant portions of U.S. energy supplies, any disruption could have far-reaching consequences for American consumers and industries. Market analysts are concerned about the timing of these measures, as they coincide with global energy market volatility. The threat of Canada pulling the plug on preferential energy pricing has created uncertainty in both financial markets and diplomatic circles. For decades, Canada has been viewed as a reliable energy partner. However, this new aggressive stance suggests a significant shift in regional power dynamics, with Ottawa wielding its energy resources as diplomatic leverage. Breaking news: trade tensions escalate as Canada threatens economic retaliation against U.S. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has unveiled potential retaliatory measures that could significantly impact U.S. markets and consumers. Ottawa is considering higher taxes and restrictions on electricity exports that could affect energy prices across northern U.S. states. "We're reviewing terms of trade in all areas, including electricity," stated a senior official from the Prime Minister's office. The impact could be severe for energy-intensive industries and urban centers dependent on Canadian power. Canada's automotive sector, which exported over $30 billion in vehicles and parts to the U.S. in 2024, is now affected. Canada canceled tax incentives for U.S. electric vehicle manufacturers on March 28, 2025, with Tesla among the primary targets. The agricultural sector presents another vulnerable front. With bilateral agricultural trade reaching $45 billion in 2024, any disruption could have significant consequences. Carney's parliamentary speech highlighted Canada's position in this sector, particularly in canola seed exports, accounting for $6 billion in trade. "They should not think our hand is weak in agriculture," Carney warned. Market analysts predict that disruption to Canadian agricultural exports could trigger a spike in U.S. domestic prices. These developments coincide with broader global trade realignments. Canada's stance is gaining domestic support, with citizens backing Carney's assertion that Canada will not always be on the losing side. U.S. purchases from Canada represent hundreds of billions of dollars annually, with petroleum products leading, followed by automotive and agricultural goods. This interdependence suggests that any escalation could lead to mutual economic pain, though Canada appears prepared to assert its trading rights. American media outlets are assessing the potential impact, particularly in the oil sector, which remains critical to bilateral trade. The situation continues to develop, with both nations' economies at stake. Here's a 1875-character news story based on the input. Breaking news: trade war looms as Canada and U.S. face off over tariffs. In a dramatic escalation of trade tensions, Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney has thrown down the gauntlet to Washington, threatening to weaponize energy exports and automotive trade in response to U.S. tariffs. The stakes couldn't be higher, with U.S. imports from Canada exceeding $460 billion in 2024. This interdependence is too complex a structure to be tested by unilateral tariffs, Carney warned on March 27, 2025, signaling Canada's readiness to deploy its economic arsenal. The threat carries weight. considering Canada's significant leverage in critical sectors. The automotive sector presents particularly striking numbers. Canada manufactures approximately 1.8 million vehicles annually, with over half destined for U.S. markets. But perhaps the most immediate concern for Americans is Carney's energy trump card, the threat to restrict electricity exports, valued at over $3 billion in 2024. "We will put oil and electricity on the table," Carney declared, sending shockwaves through northern U.S. states that heavily depend on Canadian power. While U.S. officials maintain silence, energy sector representatives warn of devastating consequences for both nations. In a strategic pivot, Carney has begun courting European and Asian markets. During recent visits to France and the UK, discussions centered on establishing alternative trade channels in energy and automotive sectors. European headlines quickly questioned whether Canada was getting out of the U.S. shadow. The tensions extend beyond energy and automobiles, encompassing long-standing disputes over steel, aluminum, and agricultural products. Despite multiple negotiations, Washington's America First stance has left Ottawa feeling cornered. Carney's March 28 statement crystallized Canada's position. "We are not saying we are destructive, but we cannot sit on our hands in the face of unfair moves." This diplomatic chess game threatens to reshape North American trade relations, with implications far beyond their shared border. Breaking news from North America, where trade tensions between Canada and the United States continue to escalate, threatening to disrupt one of the world's largest bilateral trade relationships. The automotive sector finds itself at the epicenter of this growing crisis, with both nations heavily intertwined in vehicle production. Prime Minister Mark Carney's recent statements have sent ripples through financial markets, particularly regarding possible tariff increases. "Our companies have been our most important business partners, but we cannot be the only ones to pay the price of political pressure," Carney declared, causing immediate reactions in automotive stocks. The stakes are high in the agricultural sector, where Canadian exports play a crucial role in U.S. food security. With Canadian dairy exports projected to reach $5 billion in 2024, any retaliatory measures could severely impact U.S. consumers. An American agriculture lobbyist warned, "Many farmers depend on Canadian raw materials. If this chain breaks, food inflation could spiral out of control." The total two-way trade between these North American neighbors exceeded $900 billion in 2024, highlighting their economic interdependence. Canada appears to be actively pursuing alternative trading partners, with Carney confirming a strategic pivot toward European and Asian markets. Reports indicate that France and the UK are preparing special trade arrangements with Canada, particularly in energy and automotive parts sectors. This development could reduce U.S. market share if Canada and Europe establish joint production lines. As of March 30, 2025, while specific details of Canada's planned April 2 retaliation remain under wraps, sources in Ottawa suggest that additional tariffs targeting automotive, metals, and agricultural sectors are likely. Rather than reducing energy exports, Canada appears to be exploring new international markets through fresh agreements. The situation remains fluid, with potential implications for North American economic stability and global trade patterns. Historically, such confrontations have led to difficult negotiations and temporary disruptions. What's different now is Canada's strategic pivot toward European and Asian markets, potentially reshaping North American trade dynamics permanently. As April 2 approaches, global markets watch nervously. The potential ripple effects could extend beyond bilateral relations, possibly impacting Mexico and other trading partners, especially if the U.S. continues its protectionist trajectory. The world now waits to see whether diplomacy will prevail, or if we're witnessing the beginning of a new era in North American trade relations. Breaking news: North American trade war escalates as Canada unleashes massive retaliatory tariffs. In a dramatic turn of events shaking North American markets, Canada has announced unprecedented retaliatory measures against U.S. imports. Prime Minister Mark Carney's declaration that nothing is off the table has materialized into action, with Canada imposing 25% tariffs on $155 billion worth of American goods. This follows U.S. President Donald Trump's orders levying 25% tariffs on imports from both Canada and Mexico. The trade relationship between these allies has deteriorated into what analysts call a hit-and-run struggle. The initial Canadian response included a 25% tariff on $30 billion Canadian dollars worth of goods. Markets are especially concerned about the second wave, an additional 125 billion Canadian dollars in tariffs set to take effect in 21 days if conditions don't improve. This second round targets America's core industries, impacting automotive companies like Tesla, GM, and Ford, energy sectors including oil and gas, and steel and aluminum industries. The stakes are high for both nations. With over 8,800 kilometers of shared border and annual trade exceeding $700 billion, this dispute threatens to unravel one of the world's most important economic partnerships. Industry experts are particularly concerned about the automotive sector. The timing is critical as global supply chains are already under pressure. Market analysts warn that this trade war could affect global economic stability. This is especially significant given recent shifts in international trade patterns, with nations reassessing their economic partnerships. The question isn't just who will win this trade war, but whether anyone can avoid losing in this economic showdown. Breaking news. Trade war intensifies between North American powers. In a significant escalation of trade tensions, the relationship between Canada and the United States faces its most challenging period in recent history. The year 2025 has become pivotal as both nations engage in an unprecedented tariff battle affecting billions in trade. The conflict began when the Trump administration imposed substantial tariffs on Canadian imports, 25% on general goods and 10% on energy exports. The U.S. cited national security concerns, particularly regarding illegal immigration and contraband control, though experts question these motivations. The situation intensified with an additional 25% tariff on Canadian steel and aluminum products, prompting a swift Canadian response. Under former Prime Minister Trudeau, Canada implemented retaliatory measures worth 30 billion Canadian dollars, $20.6 billion USD, on March 12, with a second round of tariffs valued at 25 billion Canadian dollars pending. The recent leadership transition in Canada adds complexity to this dispute. New Prime Minister Mark Carney has maintained a firm stance, refusing to lift retaliatory tariffs without respect from the United States. During his European tour, Carney stated at the Canadian High Commission in London, "They are disrespectful, they are not helpful, and they need to stop before they sit down and talk about our broader partnership." Carney's approach differs from his predecessors, advocating for a measured response rather than rushing into negotiations. The Prime Minister has yet to communicate with President Trump since taking office, signaling a strategic shift in diplomatic relations. The implications extend beyond government offices, impacting millions of workers and consumers in both nations. Key sectors under strain include automotive, steel, aluminum, and energy industries, with ripple effects throughout North America. As tensions persist, the international community watches closely, recognizing that the outcome could reshape trade dynamics across the continent. Breaking news. Canada takes aggressive stance in trade. War with United States, targeting auto giants. In a major development shaking the North American trade landscape, Prime Minister Mark Carney has announced Canada's readiness to impose massive retaliatory tariffs worth 125 billion Canadian dollars against U.S. products. This bold move comes as tensions escalate between the traditionally friendly neighbors. Speaking from Ottawa, Carney emphasized Canada's position of strength in addressing trade issues, while indicating some willingness to moderate the approach established by his predecessor, Justin Trudeau. However, Canada is prepared to hit back hard if the U.S. maintains its current stance. The most significant impact would be felt in the automotive sector, with industry giants like Tesla, Ford, and GMC in the crosshairs. The proposed measures include a 25% tariff on cars and electric vehicles imported from the United States, potentially reshaping the North American auto market. Key impacts for consumers and businesses. 1. Tesla could see vehicles become significantly more expensive in Canada too. Ford and GMC face potential market share losses. 3. Steel and aluminum products will face additional tariffs. 4. Total impact could reach $86.67 billion US dollars. Industry experts suggest these measures could force U.S. manufacturers to reconsider their production strategies in North America. The automotive sector, already dealing with supply chain challenges and the transition to electric vehicles, now faces additional pressure from these potential tariffs. The timing is particularly significant as it comes during ongoing negotiations between the two nations. While Carney has indicated room for diplomacy, the preparation of these extensive retaliatory measures suggests Canada is ready to take a harder line in defending its economic interests. This situation represents a significant shift in North American economic relations and could have lasting implications for consumers on both sides of the border. We'll continue monitoring this developing story and bring you updates as they become available.